Oh, hi! Welcome to my channel. I have now passed 1 month in my first job as junior software engineer at Novatech Consulting, and I put out a message on Twitter asking for questions. Here is where I'm going to answer them all. Hang tight, let's go. So, firstly, I just want to talk generally about what I've experienced in my first month. I am doing basically an onboarding training style session thing where I take the first few months to really learn the tech stack that we use in the majority of our projects and to get a good feeling for the workflow of the company so that I will hopefully not too far from now be let in on actual projects and working with actual clients. So I'm actually mostly still in a little training bubble, so I can't actually speak to actual client projects that exist already, which is probably a good thing because I'm guessing they're confidential. But what I can talk about is my experience and what I've been learning. And as on a whole, I've been learning Java, Kotlin, Spring Boot. For the most part, in fact, for the whole part, I've been learning about the back end, creating microservices, getting them to communicate, how to work with SQL and NoSQL databases, how to Dockerize the whole thing. So really just getting a grip on that side of things, a little bit on software architecture, of course, and really just understanding Git, GitLab, I guess on a more social level, understanding Slack, Confluence, how these things work, how the teams communicate, how to log my hours. I mean, it sounds silly, but these little things, there's a lot to learn. So on the whole, it's been a wonderful month. I'm on a great team. I've got some really good colleagues, really good supervisor, really good mentor. So I feel very, very supported. And really also very happy with my progress. I'm gonna take this opportunity to brag because I'm feeling so proud of the fact that I am like coding microservices in Kotlin, where a month and a half ago I had never touched Java or Kotlin, and I'd done like one tiny microservice in Express, and even then it wasn't working with Docker or anything like that. So I'm pretty proud of myself and the progress I've made. I just feel like I am in exactly the right place. I'm exactly where I should be. And yeah, just feeling very fulfilled and very happy and soaking it in while it lasts. You never know when something's going to really hit the fan. So I am just enjoying this happy little bubble that I'm in right now. On a social level, so non-tech related, I mean, really, it's just Corona keeping us all inside and really preventing me from seeing my family in Australia or having them come and see me. Some of you also know I have a 2-year-old daughter, and she hasn't seen her grandparents in, a year and a half. So that's also, really sad. And in that respect, things aren't great, but at least my daughter is wonderful. I've got a wonderful, very supportive, and awesome husband, and we are all kind of hanging in there. So that's all we can do for now in that sense. And I guess because of that, that just amplifies the satisfaction that I'm getting right now from the professional world, because there's so little in my social life right now to enjoy and appreciate. And there is no brunch to be had, you know, that the fact that work and my professional life is going so well is a real joy to me. So with that said, I'm going to get stuck into your questions, and I hope you find my answers useful. The first question I have is from Chris Averill. I'm sorry, I'm reading it over here, so you've got to forgive me. What have you found most helpful and least helpful in your onboarding and interactions with leadership? I want to be a better mentor, teacher, and manager. So that's his aspect. There hasn't been much that's been not helpful, I have to say. I suppose if I were really nitpicking, I would say that sometimes there's some assumed knowledge, um, and sometimes I haven't understood instructions clearly. But on the other hand, I also think that comes down to me also being honest and saying, I'm not understanding this. And every time I've been honest about that and said, hang on, isn't there a conflict there in what you're asking for? Or hang on, I thought you meant XYZ. Um, the response that I've been getting back has been very helpful. There's not been any like, oh, how can you not know this? Or why would you ask that? It's always been like, oh, yeah, no problems. I'll help you work that out or whatever. So I guess that kind of then goes back into the most helpful category, which is just being open to questions. And sometimes I myself am a very blunt person. I like people being blunt with me, and I'm very blunt with people. So sometimes I feel like maybe I've been a bit too blunt with people and with leaders that I've had, and they've been very, very gracious and open and said, oh, that's a good point, blah, blah, blah. And when I've spoken to them later and said, hey, if that was a bit much, like, just let me know because I don't have a great sense for that. They've been like, no, no, it's good because they've been open to constructive criticism as well. So I'd say being open to constructive criticism, being open to questions, and really not talking down to anyone, just saying, hey, here's the information. Do you understand it? Yes or no? And relying on the juniors, I guess, to be honest about that. Because it doesn't help if I, as a junior, pretend that I understand what they're talking about when I don't. Right. So that's also on me to do that, and on the other juniors to do that. What else have I found useful? I suppose the other thing I've found useful is actually practical guidance. I mentioned in my introduction that, how to fill in timesheets and how to log travel hours, things like this. They're not always immediately obvious. So I suppose practical help is something that I found very, very useful. But again, it's just about being open, just about being there and saying, hey, I'm here if you need help. You can be honest with me, just creating that safe environment to ask questions. But my guess is that if you're in my Twitter feed asking about how to be a better manager, you probably already know to do that. So just keep doing that. I've got another question here from Marta. She says, I find it really hard to deal with imposter syndrome. Do you experience it? And if so, how do you deal with it? This is something I have spoken about a lot before, but I will be creating a whole video on it because I get asked this question a lot and I feel like I have a unique perspective on it because I don't really feel imposter syndrome in this job, but I feel like part of that is because I did feel a lot of imposter syndrome when I was an opera singer, and I learned how to deal with that and how to overcome it. And as a result, I don't really feel it nowadays in tech. So it's definitely what I consider one of my big transferable skills from opera was actually somehow being hardened against it. But I can tell you the general gist of what I advise to people when I talk about this, which is that I feel like imposter syndrome comes when you feel like you're supposed to be at a certain level and you don't meet that level, right? And that pressure to be at a certain level and to prove that you can be at that level, that is the problem, right? The problem isn't you, right? You're not especially dumb or especially smart. I mean, maybe you are, but I don't really know you. But most of the time, you're average intelligence. Sounds awful, I'm sorry. But most people, by definition, are of average intelligence or close to it, right? So it's very unlikely if you're in this field that you are going to have trouble in that respect. So the problem isn't you. That is what I'm saying. The problem is your expectation of yourself and your desire to prove yourself. And so what I always say is rather than going in with a proving yourself mindset, what you have to do is see every failure as a learning opportunity. So when you have to go in knowing you have gaps in your knowledge, because Everyone has gaps in their knowledge, especially juniors, but seniors too. No one can know everything in this field. No one. It's not possible. This is huge. Like, if you don't understand how big tech is and how huge tech is, then maybe this is news to you, but you are never going to know everything. Never, ever. So, everyone has gaps in their knowledge. The question is, how do you find them and how do you fix them? So, when you fail, what you need to do is, aha, there's a gap in my knowledge. I need to take this opportunity to learn that so I can become a better developer. So it's not some insult to your intelligence, it's just you finding the gaps. And that is a good thing, right? That's a learning opportunity. So, yeah, in short, it's about going from a proving yourself mentality to a learning opportunity mentality. That's the short version. Hopefully that makes sense. Uh, my third question is from Mo, who is one of my regular followers. Hi, Mo. How are you monitored work-wise? Is it mostly being logged onto Slack or Teams and pushing to GitHub? So my team uses GitLab, firstly, so not with GitHub. We have very flexible work hours at Novatech. Obviously, you're expected to be at dailies and at any core meetings that happen with clients, for example, retros, all this kind of stuff. You're expected to be there. But other than that, they're pretty flexible with working hours. We have to work 40 hours a week, but we can work them really whenever we want, aside from those core times that I just mentioned. So there isn't a lot of monitoring in terms of that time. I think it's mostly done on a basis of trust. We do talk a lot on Slack during the day as trainees because we're working in a group of 4 right now. We are talking to each other on Slack. We are talking to our supervisor on Slack. But, and sometimes I'll get a message from my supervisor saying, hey, how's that going? Do you feel like you have any questions? We can ask him to come into meetings with us, for example. So yeah, I mean, we're on Slack a lot. I would say Slack is the main thing that we are using to communicate. But I wouldn't say that we are monitored, if that makes sense. I don't know how common this is in tech companies, the flexible work hours, but for us, I find it very, very good. I suppose if you were really looking to, game the system or cheat the hours, like you probably could, but personally, I find that when I am given responsibility and trust from a company that I tend to want to live up to their expectations more, not less. So maybe that's just an individual thing, but for me, I respond really well to that. So I try to always be very, very honest in that sense. I suppose from here and there, it might take 5 or 10 minutes to check Twitter with a cup of coffee every few hours, but I have a feeling that that's okay with my company. Hi, Dominic, if you're watching. My next question is from Rena. Rena says, I only just started learning and I'm still not sure what direction I want to go, but I'm curious what your average working day looks like. So I mentioned briefly the dailies before. Our average day begins with a daily at 9 a.m. I usually start work at 8 or 8:30, so I'll normally take that time to do admin kind of stuff or to wrap up any loose ends from the coding I did the night before, or if I've had some sort of brainwave during the night about how to solve a problem, then I often try to do that before the daily because I'm normally right. And if not, then I guess I can mention it in the daily and get some help anyway, so it's win-win. And then the daily is at 9 a.m. That daily is like a short session where every person in the team talks about what they did the day before and what they're doing today, right? So what are they working on? What are they having trouble with, or what's going well, or how are they feeling? That's usually at 9, so that'll finish around 9:15, let's say. From there, I'll normally check in with my team. We'll either have another quick voice call. This is my team of 4 trainees, and we'll talk about what we're doing in the project or where we're at, or if we are coming to the end of a ticket, maybe checking in, seeing what ticket might come next, or we are checking each other's work. And then we normally just kind of start coding. And if we have any trouble, we'll again hop on a Zoom call. So a lot of the day is basically just flicking between Slack, coding, and Zoom calls of some description, and occasionally email. And that's basically it. And as I said, we have flexible work hours. So for me personally, from time to time, my husband's work hours will conflict with our daughter's daycare. So sometimes I will have to leave work at 3 or 3:30 to go pick her up or something similar, and then I might do an hour or two at night instead, or I might work an extra hour the next day or something along those lines, to try to keep those times as equal and manageable as possible. But really, I mean, that's what the average workday looks like for us. We do have some days with lots of meetings. Those meetings are normally talking about workload or doing a retrospective on the sprint that we just finished, or we will talk about what's coming up next. Our supervisor, who is supervising our training, will sometimes do sessions where he'll show us how a specific technology works. So for example, recently we were doing Docker, learning a lot about Docker. So he'll take a few hours to kind of talk us through how to integrate Docker into our projects and what Docker is about and how it works and here are the main commands and, this kind of stuff. So kind of like a little mini course, I suppose. So yeah, all in all, that's kind of how the week rolls. It's pretty open, pretty flexible, and I guess from my perspective, it's a pretty good way to be because it allows you room to learn, which is the whole point of being in a training program. So yeah, really great. Now Muhammad 14 asks, how hard is it and why? What about the social aspect? Personally, I don't find most of it hard. As I said in my introduction, I've been working mostly on the back end with technologies and programming languages I haven't used before. So for me, I've actually found the configuration side of things to be the hardest, just because that works completely differently. Like I'm using IntelliJ and Java and Kotlin and Maven and Spring Boot. I'm not using VS Code and JavaScript and Node and Express. So there are just a completely different way of organizing and managing settings. When something breaks, I don't have as good an idea of how to fix it as I did before. So I suppose for me, that's been the hardest thing, is actually just knowing how to configure what I want, how to get things to communicate in certain ways. But that's, I think, just because it's all quite new to me, technologically speaking. In terms of, sorry, he didn't say in social aspect, he said in terms of social respect. So is it hard in terms of social respect? No, not at all. There's a fly. I've definitely felt respected. I think one thing that I really like about Novatech is that I feel like it's got a really good balance between friendliness and professionalism. It's one of the things, it's one of the things I talk about to everyone who asks me about my job or who asks me about Novatech. It's basically the thing I say to them, that there is enough friendliness that you feel happy to be there and happy to be in social situations and you feel relaxed around your colleagues, but it's not so friendly like people aren't pretending they're your best friends, right? It's not who we are. We're colleagues, so we're not, no one's kind of pretending it's not a work environment. But on the other hand, it's still very professional. We're still getting a lot of work done. We're still able to stay mostly on topic and on target. And I find it to be a really good balance of those things. Not so professional that things are stilted or awkward or serious, super serious, but instead this wonderful mix where you feel relaxed and happy and productive. And yeah, I mean, as I said, I'm still in a new employee bubble, so maybe this changes later, but all I can say is that right now, I definitely don't feel like there are any problems with social respect in my company or my team. No. And even if I did, let's face it, I probably wouldn't tell you, but I don't, I swear. This last question I really like. It's from Anderson Silva, and he asks, what kind of knowledge do boot camps and Udemy courses not teach? I'm thinking like how to read code, how to have a systems thinking approach, maybe tacit knowledge for coders. Or do you think that's something you can only learn on the job? There are so many things. There are so many things. Firstly, version control and Git, which is a technical subject, I know, but I think it is something that everyone should learn, and it is really important. I would say I, from a social aspect, a lot of social skills I think are really important to learn. Mainly, kind of like I said earlier, how to give feedback and how to get feedback, being open to feedback, not being defensive, not going on the attack when someone has a problem with something you've done, um, but instead listening and trying to work out how you can do it better or viewing it as an opportunity to do better. Um, I really do think that taking constructive criticism is a skill that is underplayed when a lot of people are talking about coding, and I think it is the skill you need to work on. Another thing is you mentioned having a systems thinking approach when learning to code. I actually talk about this in another video where I mentioned how to think like a programmer. I do believe that there is a way to think like a programmer, and I do believe that, like everything I talk about on here, it's a skill that can be trained and that practice makes it better. So I would go with that. How to read code. Yeah. I mean, definitely you need to learn to read other people's code, but I would say the best way to do that is just to look at other people's code. That is definitely something you can practice in advance. Join any community. I'm a huge proponent of the Odin project. If you start working through this fly, I tell you, if you start working through their curriculum and join their Discord server, you'll see a lot of people's code in there and how they've solved problems, and it helps train you to think how are they thinking, how they are thinking. So definitely take that time. I would say just be aware you are never going to understand someone else's code like that, right? You have to take the time to understand what each variable is doing, what each function is doing. It's not something that ever becomes that quick, right? You just have to take a moment and slow down. In general, when I've had trouble understanding other people's code, it's because I just haven't slowed down and really read it line by line. So unlike with a book, right, where you can speed read or skim read with a bit of practice, I don't feel like that skill, at least not to me yet. But I mean, just observing other seniors that I've watched as well, I don't think that's something that happens. Like, you don't just start skim reading code and expect to understand it. You really have to take your time. So, yeah, I mean, there's plenty of knowledge that I think people can do with, but I think a lot of it comes down to social skills, and being kind to yourself, because this is a really hard area. Like, that, I would say for me personally, I don't find it hard to get started in coding or get started in programming. I think, learning the basics is actually lots of fun, but it's huge. It's a huge field, and it's just, you have to be kind to yourself, and you have to be open to being wrong, and you have to be open to learning new things and to finding the gaps in your knowledge and then trying to fix them. So I would say that's something. It's not really related to my first month of my job though, so I'm sorry that it didn't relate back to that. But I hope that at least that helps give you an idea of how I think people can prepare a bit better aside from just learning a programming language and making projects. Yeah. Well, that's it, everyone. I'm sorry it's been a bit of a rambly video. To be perfectly honest, I'm really tired and I'm really thirsty. So I'm going to go now have a glass of water. Please do leave me comments. I mean, I can't see your faces. I really have no idea how I do in these videos unless you tell me. So please do take a moment to write a comment below. I appreciate each and every one of them, and I appreciate each and every one of you. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.